Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, about tonight's topic for discussion, and about whatever else they might want to talk about. And today, tonight, I have one guest because the stuff we're talking about requires only one guest, Craig Heron. Thank you, Craig, for coming on board.
You bet.
And one of the main reasons I wanted Craig on board is because most of my guests, or a lot of them anyhow, are progressive or left or liberal, and I found a conservative guy who's brighter than I am, and I figured we'd have a good matchup talking about the election process and the election and whatever else that comes up. So, welcome. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Are you nervous? I am.
I guess a little bit nervous.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you came tonight. All right.
Thank you.
So, as you people know out there, my shows typically go in about 3 segments. The first segment is a bio segment, or sort of a personal thing, but not too personal, where I ask questions about who you are and where you came from and all sorts of other things like that, so that the viewers can get a flavor of why it is you think and feel the way you do, and what's behind your expressions when we're talking about, particularly about things that are important and pressing in our country, like the election, 2008 presidential candidacy, and the run-ups and that sort of thing. So my viewers know who I am, but I'll say just a few words in case there's a few new viewers out there. I'm a retired clinical psychologist, and I spend most of my time now doing this show and a few other things as a TV producer. I do some modeling and acting. I'm also a humanist minister, and I teach transactional analysis to a few clients in the private office since I gave up my practice in Southern California many years ago, so I don't deal with insurance companies and the system anymore, because all I do is teach TA. I don't do psychotherapy or psychological counseling anymore. Wink. So let me start by asking you who you are, so the audience can get a flavor of you.
Sure.
So who is Craig Heron?
Craig Heron is a Washington native. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, and went in the Army after high school for 3 years. This was during the Vietnam era, but I wasn't in Vietnam. I was stateside. And then I I got out of the Army, graduated, whatever, got the heck out of the Army, though it was a good experience.
Did you volunteer?
I volunteered.
Yeah.
I volunteered.
So did I, yeah.
Oh, really? And it was, then I went to the University of Washington after I got out of the Army, and got an undergraduate degree in business administration. And then I went, actually my first year after I graduated, I went to Japan and I taught English with my wife. And then I came back to Seattle, worked, and then went back to the University of Washington, got an MBA, and then I got involved in a lot of Japan-connected things, because I became pretty fluent in Japanese, and so eventually that led to getting into the semiconductor business with Texas Instruments.
Nippon, huh?
Nippon.
Nihon de wakarimasu ka?
Yeah, wakarimasu yo.
I
don't think your audience is not going to understand what the heck we're saying
I'm
here.
having fun with it, the heck with the audience. Yeah, it's in about 60 years ago when I was in the occupation in Japan, in Yokohama. And I think we've chatted about this a little before, but it always fascinates me when I hear someone who speaks Japanese and learns Japanese, particularly as much as you have, and I would be tempted to say a few things in Japanese, but it's 60 years ago, and I'd be embarrassed as all get out.
Well, that's good that you still remember a few things. It's a challenge to stay up with the language. I meet with the tutor every week, have been doing that for many years.
Really?
And I worked in a Japanese company, and then one of my primary jobs at Texas Instruments was selling to Japanese companies, and so, in fact, that's why they hired me originally, because I was bilingual. So.
What persuaded you to go to Japan after your graduation?
It was fun. It was fun. I took Japanese my senior year. at the University of Washington, just as an elective, and I enjoyed languages. I actually spoke German pretty well before that, but I looked at the time in the late 70s there, the Japanese economy was, breaking all kinds of records in growth, and it was a very ascendant economy, and I thought, I'm in business, and I like multicultural things anyway, and so I took the language and did real well at it, and decided I want to learn more, and the best way to do that is to go where everybody speaks Japanese, and so that's what I did, and my wife and I went over there and taught English for a year.
I have some more questions along those lines, but let me get through some basic stuff first, all right? We said where you were born, and did we say when? Is it okay?
Well, sure. I was born in 1955, so I'm 52, soon to be 53.
I always have one trick question for a guest. Why were you born?
Why was I born? Well, that was a time when families were larger than they are now. No question about it. I was the fourth of 5 kids, and that was the accepted thing. I imagine you came from a fairly good-sized family.
12. I'm the baby of 12.
12. Wow.
Of the Mohicans, if I may. Pardon me, my Indian viewers.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But, okay, if I ask you a question that you don't want to answer, you can finesse it or talk around it like some of the presidential candidates, or you can say, I don't want to answer that, or get lost, Don, okay?
Sure, of course.
Is there a religious preference that my audience would find useful to know about you?
No.
Okay. We know about your education, and we know a little bit about your work. And is there a partner in your life?
Yes. Oh, yes. Has been for, this is our 30th year here.
30 years? Nobody stays married that long.
Oh, well, we have 3 children, and 2 of them are engaged to be married this year, and then I have another daughter that's at San Diego State University, and so they keep us pretty busy. Though they're all out of the house now.
So then it's just you and your wife now, huh?
That's right.
Man, what does she do? Is she stay at home? Or
no, she works for Merrill Lynch in town. And
business family, huh?
Yeah, I guess so.
Are you proud of your kids?
Oh, very much so.
I was looking for your reaction in your face, not your words, because I know you are. We've chatted about them before, yeah.
Sure.
So are they going to watch a video of you on television?
Oh, I imagine they will.
You want to say something to them? Where's their camera? Number 2 over there. Can you say something to them?
Yeah, you better be good, that's for sure.
No. Come on, you're putting me on the spot here, Dad. I know what a nice guy he is, and I'm sure he's a fine dad. Yeah, thank you. So continuing on, any children yet? You're too young for grandchildren.
Grandchildren? Well, they probably won't be too far away, since we've got one getting married in October, and they seem to want to have children pretty soon, so that'd be a good thing.
Yeah. I can see you as tiny as you are with a little baby in your arms.
Yeah, well, had some practice doing that. It's been a while, though.
You probably have some stories about your relative size compared to the Japanese in Tokyo, huh?
Well, you tend to stick out. There's some advantages to that when you're riding on a crowded subway train, and everybody else is at a different level. At least you have some free breathing space. I mean, it's amazing how crowded those subways can get.
You really pack them in there. You hold your arms.
Oh, they have people that that's their function, is pushing people, during the rush hours, pushing people into the train to get them all packed in there and then get them going down the road.
Pretty intimate, huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd come home with lipstick on my white shirt quite a bit there. That was.
Okay, we're gonna cut that out. So, how about pets or hobbies? Anything of interest?
Pets? No, we haven't had pets. Hobbies? Well, where I met you, I work out at the gym quite a bit, and the Japanese has kept me pretty busy over the years. And I like backpacking and racquetball and things like that. Swimming lately, a lot of swimming. So.
I'm going to take you to my agent, because with that rich voice you've got, we should let you do some voiceovers and get some extra money, as though you had the time for it. It's beautiful, a nice, rich baritone voice.
Oh, thank you.
Can I ask you about your political persuasion? Some people don't like to divulge their political persuasion.
Oh,
I'm a leftist, progressive, screaming liberal on the left side, a patriotic American too.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear that. I tend to be on the other side of the spectrum. I've not always voted for Republicans, but over the years I have tended that way. I mean, the last Democrat I voted for president was Jimmy Carter in 1980. So I voted for Carter over Reagan in 1980, but since then I've been solidly Republican.
Interesting. That's a context that I find hard to deal with now personally myself in terms of Republicans and Democrats, because I'm old enough to remember when there was a Jacob Javits, a Republican
New York.
in New York, and he was as liberal as they come.
Yes.
I like to look at people in terms of whether they're left or right or liberal or conservative or all those terms, because I'm kind of hung up on that era a while ago when political parties made a difference. But anyhow, I'm getting ahead of myself here.
Sure.
How do you see the mainstream media? Do you see it as centrist or left or right or what?
Well, mainstream media.
You don't have to answer.
No. That's an interesting point, actually, because the media is very different, obviously, than it once was. I mean, there are so many different outlets now. I mean, you actually have the possibility of some balance out there that you might not have had in the past because there's so many possible. There's Fox News out there is on the right-hand side of the spectrum. On the left side, there's a lot more. There has been for a long time, but it has changed in character. It's very obvious in terms of the journalists and the people that are involved in the media. There's been surveys done, and they asked them, well, who'd you vote for in the last election, and what are your political leanings? And generally, about close to 90% are leaning towards Democrats, and so you have to keep that in mind.
To the left, if I may.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So, but then for me, and I'm going to grind my axe for a second
Sure.
here.
Sure.
The people, the journalists, the old-fashioned journalists particularly, were clearly left and liberal, if I may, or leaning in that direction. But nowadays, there's this layer above them, the editorial people, the people who decide what's printed and rewrite this or rewrite that.
Right.
And I think that tends to be generally in the mainstream media more conservative across the board.
Than it was in the past?
Yes.
Really?
I think there's more of that kind of screening going on now. What do you think of that?
What tells you that? Why do you think that? What's the evidence in the fact that's happened?
For me, the evidence is I subscribe to a lot of progressive and left internet stuff and publications, and Jim Hightower is one of my heroes,
Uh-huh.
And
He used to have his own radio show
Howard
there.
Zinn, and Howard Zinn, and a few others like that who are really quite liberal and left. So I like to think I have input from a lot of different sources, particularly since it's sort of my job, since I have a talk show talking about political issues. And this is why I have that view of where the mainstream media is nowadays compared to where it was, say, during Roosevelt's time or even in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Uh-huh.
But do you see the mainstream media by and large as being more left or right or what?
Oh, there's a strong indication that's the case. I don't know about the editing going on at a high level in the various news organizations, but things have changed too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I used to be for example, I read Time magazine, subscribed to Time magazine for decades,
Mm-hmm.
and since I was in the Army.
I was a Newsweek guy, I still am.
Oh, is that right?
Yes.
But anyway, I can't hardly read it anymore because it's so clearly biased.
In which direction?
Oh, to the left. There's no question about
I
it.
knew we'd have a point to fight over. I
Yeah,
see it
well.
as biased to the right, but in a way that most people can't detect it.
Maybe to the right of you, but to the right, or way to the left of me, that's for sure.
We better leave that one alone. What do you think? Yeah. So let's moving on. How about any persons from the past or alive today who you look up to or admire particularly? maybe somebody comes to mind, maybe someone doesn't.
Well, it's interesting. My brother-in-law is a law professor at Brigham Young University in Utah,
Uh-huh.
and he and I talk almost daily about politics and such. And so, I mean, it's wonderful that the telephone talk has become so inexpensive, and the internet, and so it's made it virtually costless to communicate with so many people. It's a wonderful phenomenon.
What does that make you smile as you think about your brother-in-law? And you talk
Well,
about politics?
we're partners in crime in terms of we lean in the same direction there. But it's good. We bounce ideas off each other. Obviously, we're mostly in the same direction there. But it's good. I enjoy the political banter, and we've had a close relationship for a long time. It's a lot of fun for me.
Oh, okay. I've got a note here that I call story time.
Okay.
Tell me a story that would be interesting to my viewers out there about your adventures in Japan or whatever comes to mind. And that's your one personal story that produced a reaction or a feeling that made a memory that's worth repeating to somebody.
Well, I guess I told you that I studied Japanese in college and then went over there, and that was the first time I had ever lived in a foreign country, almost the first time I had visited a foreign country other than Canada or Mexico.
That brings up thoughts and feelings and all sorts of things whenever you say that, so please go on.
Well,
I was 27 months over there.
Yeah, it was very, I think, it was very educational to live in another culture and see how other people live, and it's to a large extent, particularly early on, it was as an outsider looking in, and really I couldn't speak very well. I understood quite a bit of the grammar, but my vocabulary was limited, and plus when it's coming at you at natural speed, when you're early on in studying languages, it's very difficult. But still, you learn a lot, and there are a lot of English speakers over there, and so you learn a lot about a society. And I think I know, and I've read a lot about it. And the Japanese themselves are a very homogeneous society, and probably the most homogeneous society in the world, and that in itself makes them interesting, and you can categorize them probably more readily than you can any particular nationality in the world, because there are certain aspects that are they're very group oriented, and they do like to and being part of a group and being part of a very tight-knit group, you follow certain social rules. So, and there's a lot of pressure on them to stay within that organization and not to stand out too much, and that has an impact in education and such too. But you can characterize them to a certain extent. They all go through exactly the same educational system. It's very uniform. They all study the same textbooks across the country. They go to standardized tests very early on, and they have national, well, just like we do. They have national television, national newspapers, and they're all reading and seeing much of the same thing, which we are to a much larger extent than we used to in this country. But over the years, you can make certain judgments that apply in most cases, whereas in the United States, it's harder to characterize the people.
Different subcultures and areas of the
all
country.
Different kinds of things.
So it's more homogeneous. Hear what you're saying about Japan.
Yeah, and of course, one of the nice things about over there is that there's virtually no crime, and so you feel safe wherever you go. I never worried about walking around anywhere over there any time of the day at all.
So virtually no crime because of the social stigma attached to being.
Well, they're very much rule followers, and there are rules for everything, and there's a very strong social bond and social pressures to stay within norms, and by and large they do. And has a lot of nice features. I mean, it is the second largest economy in the world. They didn't get there by being inefficient. I mean, there's efficiencies involved in having a good organization and well-disciplined people and such.
So what do you bring to your work here and your business orientation here that you learn from spending so much time with the Japanese people and their culture and their business model? Anything come to mind that you learned and applied in your work here?
I don't know anything specifically. It gives you perspective on
Sure.
On things. I mean, I was within a Japanese business organization, so I mean, you certainly make comparisons. I actually worked for a Korean company, which is now known as LG. At that time, it was Gold Star, but I was working for them in California primarily, but I traveled. And then that also gave me added
Yes.
perspective in the differences in the Korean and Japanese cultures, and it fills out your education, that's for sure, and gives me a different view than probably a lot of Americans just because I've experienced it.
Oh, I kind of envy that you've done that and done what your travel and you're learning the language. And I learned just enough to order some sake or something. But
It's
now,
a big investment in time.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
So is there a last question in this vein? Is there some Japanese person, male or female, that in your dealings with those people, that something unique or memorable happened in your association with them or meeting them? Like, for example, I can't say you were mugged in the subway because they don't mug people over there, but did somebody do something out of the way or pardon me, different that causes a memory for you to relate on?
I can't think of anything.
Okay.
I mean, other than, I mean, there are, I mean, you can say it's a homogenous society, but there are lots of characters too over there.
That's what I'm looking for. Make it juicy.
Well, I mean,
All right, never mind.
Yeah, there are lots of characters out there who do some things that are definitely outside of the norm.
Yeah. So I've got another category here before we go to the subject
Sure.
of philosophical. Are you your brother's or sister's keeper? That's two tricky questions. I won't ask you any more.
Are we talking in general terms, as in, for example, altruism, or are we talking about within the family situation, the immediate family, as in real brothers and sisters, or how do you want to define that in this case?
How do you want to answer it? Which one do you want to look at?
Well, since we're
meant
talking about
altruism.
politics, and then we probably should go into that realm, because
Yes.
Going into personal relationships within a family are probably not a good idea. I mean, but in terms of my brother's keeper,
Yes.
In our society, in our world,
Yes.
how much responsibility do I bear for the other people's lives and how they live them, and I mean how if they get enough or they're that's a good question. Like most people, I'm mostly focused on my immediate family.
Sure.
It's just because it's a challenge out there. It's a challenge to make a way for yourself in the world, and get to a point where you can actually provide a living for others. So I've been pretty self-oriented and family-oriented, to the exclusion of doing a lot of things for other people, altruistically.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As far as doing things for other people, in terms of the business world, of course, that's a totally different thing. Altruism and being a successful salesman are very different, but there is some commonality there. A successful salesman often is someone who listens to his customers well, and not only on what their business situation is, but what their personal situation is, and be sympathetic and understanding of not only, again, what their needs are for their business, but also personal needs, and so you make connections. And I'm pretty good at making connections with customers.
Yeah.
And what that amounts to is trust. You know, if you can develop a trusting relationship with people, then both people, it's a win-win situation. It's not like I'm stealing from them. Yes, I want to get money from them. There's no question about it.
Sure.
That's what business is all about. But it's an exchange for something, and they value what I offer, and so it's a good situation. And I think that the business environment is ideally like that, and to a large extent it is. When business is successful, it's serving the needs of consumers, and so I know that it can get out of hand. Sure, and, there is the concept of corporate greed out there, and it's real, and there needs to be checks and balances, but you don't want to kill the goose that laid the golden egg either. The whole idea of private incentive is very important, particularly when you look at the the 1900s was a very large social experiment on a worldwide basis, and many countries that tried communism and various forms of socialism, and there is certainly, socialism defined broadly. You could call us a socialist country relative to what it was 150 years ago, before income taxes and such things. In fact, income taxes didn't start until less than 100 years ago in this country. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. How's our time looking? Is the countdown clock working appropriately? Very good. All right, so it looks like it's about time for us to take a little break. But before you do that, let me read something I promised I would read. I want to say a few things, and then I'll show you our broadcast schedule and tell you how to watch Dr. Don's shows on your computer. For you viewers who live in the Washington County part of the Portland, Oregon metro area, Conversations with Dr. Don shows are broadcast 5 times each week. Typically, a new show is first aired on a Tuesday on Channel 11 and is rebroadcast on the following Friday through Monday on other channels. Broadcast dates, times, and stations for you viewers will be up on the screen in a moment. They put them up a little quick for me, but that's okay. Before we show you the local broadcast schedule, I want to tell you local viewers about my Conversations with Dr. Don live call-in show. About every 3 months or so, I do a live on-air Dr. Don call-in show for you Portland, Oregon metro area viewers. The next live call-in show will be on Thursday. Can you put that panel up, please? At 8 p.m., there it is, on Comcast Cable, Channel 11, and on Verizon Cable, Channel 22. If you are watching from the Portland, Oregon metro area, call in and get on the air with Dr. Don on that date. It's fun, believe me. And while we're talking about live call-in shows, on the first and third Thursday evenings of every month at 9 p.m. on Comcast Channel 11 and on Verizon Channel 22, you can watch another similar live call-in show. It's called Do Something, and it's hot, so that's a lot of fun. And you can tell your computer-using friends to watch the shows on the internet anytime by going to www.video.google.com. www.video.google.com and search Conversations with Dr. Don, and you'll see a whole series of my shows that are available on the web. Okay, Mr. Floor Director, let's put up the local broadcast schedule again. And this time we'll leave it up long enough for the viewing audience to make notes, and we'll take them. Okay, we're back. Thanks for staying tuned. And for you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people, like my friend over here, Craig Heron, like most of you out there, about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals, and about what it is that we decided to talk about tonight. So moving ahead now to the next segment, let's talk about the title of the show, the 2008 presidential race. And we had talked in the past, I think, about the New Hampshire primary and what's been going on until today. This is the 17th that we're recording this. We have, what other things are going on in the presidential race? We have caucuses, and then South Carolina is coming up.
Right. They're coming up in a couple of days, South Carolina and Nevada caucuses there. It's a very open race at this point, which is interesting. There's certainly, there were thoughts that it might, by now it'd be clear who would win this thing, but it's very unclear, probably more unclear on the Republican side than on the Democratic side, but it's still, that's still not clear at all who's going to win that. It's going to become more clear, obviously, after this weekend to a certain extent, and after Florida, which is a big one, and then of course
this weekend is South Carolina.
South Carolina and Nevada.
In Nevada, yeah.
And then Florida is the next is a very big one, much bigger than anything so far. And then comes Super Tuesday or Tsunami Tuesday on the 5th, I believe, of February.
Mm-hmm. So, do you think this is the optimal way to have a presidential selection process, preliminary?
No, I don't think it's optimum.
What would you do if you were in charge and you'd arrange the primary process to have it better than it is now?
It's a good question. I mean, it's been this way for a long time, but this year was a particularly glaring example of how some small states had the possible power to determine who the candidates would be, and it's pretty clear that the Iowa and New Hampshire, Michigan probably less so. Probably Michigan is probably quite a bit more representative than New Hampshire, say, or Iowa too has characteristics that are probably not common with the majority of people living in this country. Majority of people living in this country, of course, are living in cities.
Yeah.
And so far, the only state where we've had a very major city involved in an election is Michigan, and Michigan had actually very low turnout too, so that skews things because the weather was bad and such. And plus,
and then the Democratic Party said, "No, we're going to punish you for moving your primary up." And is this democracy? How do the citizens who would vote Democratic feel about what happened to them in Michigan?
Well, they've got to feel disenfranchised to a large extent, though it's still expected that by the time of the convention that they will seat all of the Michigan delegates, but we'll see.
Who would you like to see be our next president of all of the candidates running in both parties?
Well, it's pretty clear that I want a Republican to win, and I think there's a lot of good candidates running for the Republicans this year. Lots of executive experience in the candidates that are running this year for the Republicans, in contrast with the Democrats. And if you look at the top 3 Democrats this year, you've got Hillary Clinton and Obama and Edwards, and there is not a day of executive experience amongst the 3 of them, which is an interesting point. I mean, actually, David Broder of the Washington Post made that point this morning in his column, and that is something to consider, because obviously these guys, all of them, want to be the chief executive of the United States, and not having any executive experience in your resume has got to hurt.
I'm not really surprised. I suppose I am that you left out my favorite candidate, Dennis Kucinich.
Boy,
And
he
I
is, but he's not one of the major candidates, as you well recognize.
I can appreciate how you would. You've now verified your conservative credentials, because we don't recognize someone who we don't like who comes too close to being a socialist.
I think I said the major
I'm being
candidates.
provocative. We've been going too smooth here.
Yeah, he was the mayor of Cleveland, right? At one time.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And he was quite successful. He was the boy mayor of what, way back.
You've done your homework.
Oh, well, I've read the newspapers and such for a long time.
But then, who would you like to see? A Republican? Would you go further and speculate on who that might be? Of course, it might affect your business relationships with people, your customers.
Oh, no.
Thompson, is it?
Well,
Rudy? You like Rudy, don't you?
I like Rudy. I do like Rudy, and I would be quite satisfied. I have to say that I think I'd be satisfied with Giuliani, with Romney, with McCain, with Thompson, and maybe even Huckabee. I have some reservations about Huckabee, but he's probably the smoothest of the bunch. I mean, he really connects with people, no question about it.
He's interesting, in that he's very likable and smooth. That sounds like a negative.
Well,
another way.
he is a lawyer, a Southern lawyer, and
he's folksy, and he seems
oh, yeah.
like down to earth. And yet, his fundamentalist, whether it be Christian or Islam or whatever, kind of scares me. Being a humanist and an agnostic, a skeptic.
But he's a fellow minister, right?
Or an atheist. I didn't say atheist, You know
Right.
the difference between an atheist and an atheist. An atheist is a pejorative. It's been tainted. An atheist invites my person I'm speaking to think, what does that really mean? It means I don't have a belief. It doesn't mean that I'm saying there is no God or there is no hereafter.
Well, don't they? That's normally defined as an agnostic, don't you? Basically, say someone who it doesn't know whether there is or not. I guess that's a definition there. That agnostic doesn't say there is no God, but doesn't it doesn't think that you can know whether there is one or not. I guess.
Mm-hmm. But I was making a point. I wanted to grind my little axe here about atheist and atheist, and invite others to see atheists, or even the term that are used to describe them, as human beings, and not someone who are really the offspring of Satan.
Yeah, well,
I
don't believe in that. I don't believe that that's the case. There's, I'm not a religious person. And I recognize that although there's been an awful lot of good things that have come out of churches and religions, and there's a lot of good things, but if you look through history, there's also been some pretty bad things that have come out of because of religion and because of the way that people exercise their religion. They think they're exercising their religion anyway.
Or is it part of the human genetic makeup that whether they have a religion or don't have a religion, that they're still going to behave in this way that's inhumane or self-destructive or not loving their neighbor or being responsible for their neighbor? I can't say that religion has caused more deaths, human against human, than people who are atheists or non-believers.
Right.
Yeah.
But of course, in our world environment these days, we're all very well aware of a pretty much institutionalized inhumanity to others in the name of religion, and it's actually, it seems to have becoming a little less popular in the Arab world anyway, because of some of the evidence that Al Qaeda it's not the most pleasant thing in the world to be under the government of Al Qaeda type people. I mean, if you look at Anbar province in Iraq, and you look at Afghanistan, you can bet that most Afghanis are happy as heck that they're not run by the Taliban any longer.
Are they happier that they're being run by the U.S. now instead of the Taliban? You can tell by my tone of voice.
Right. They're not happy to have any foreigners in there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But and Al Qaeda was a foreigner too for them, but they had a big influence on the Taliban. But that's history, and pretty well done, though not entirely done. We're sending more troops over there right now to Afghanistan, actually, so it's not a done deal.
Why are we sending more troops to Afghanistan?
Well, I don't know well. I'm aware of it. It's obviously for security purposes, so they think that the powers that be, the government, has come to the conclusion that we don't have enough troops to maintain a proper level of security over there.
It's been read where there's some speculation that some troops, American troops, are being sent there in order to do something about nuclear weapons.
Oh.
Yeah, to be available there in case things go bananas in Pakistan next door.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. That certainly would be a possibility. You'd want to have something pre-positioned in that case, but that'd be a very messy situation to get involved in.
Oh, so let's switch over to something nice and peaceful. And Iraq, was it appropriate for the U.S. to attack Iraq?
I think
Or
it
don't
was.
you want to go there?
I think it was. Saddam Hussein was a very bad influence in the area, in the region, in the world, and he was actively working to undermine the U.S. Policy goals anyway, and also the biggest thing, of course, is the threat that he represented to the oil supply. And yeah, that's, you can talk, of course, his President George Bush's father attacked Iraq after Iraq had attacked Kuwait, and basically and justified attacking Iraq on the basis of defending a sovereign nation, which is a great thing and everything. But of course, there's been lots of attacks on sovereign nations, and we don't pay attention to it. Why? Because it's not in our interest. And what's in our interest generally has to be the guiding. Time out. I know whose interest. I know what you're saying.
See, your mind reader.
I've got it predicted already. Yes.
Talk about attacking sovereign nations. Well, at least you can say that the U.S. is up front with attacking sovereign nations. It seems that the U.S. for many, many years has been attacking sovereign nations using surrogates, subverting and destroying
During the Cold War,
budding
of course,
socialist economies.
the Cold War, that was the nature of the Cold War. There was surrogates used on both sides of the Cold War. There's no question about it.
So what need we do about what's going on in Iraq today?
I think we have to continue on.
It's a toughie.
It's a toughie because we're likely to be there quite a long while to stabilize the situation. It seems to be stabilizing. I mean, if you look at statistics in terms of deaths and in terms of a mass remigration back into the country of Iraqis, there's been tens of thousands that have come in the last few months back